Very nice. All right, so today it is my honor to be here to present you how to ace your engineering interviews using all the wonderful resources available to all of the Cornell student on Exponent. So before we dive into details, so who am I? So I graduated from Peking University in China before obtaining PhD degrees in computer engineering in University of Maryland. And then I started working, I started my first job in Silicon Valley before I moved to Google. And at the same time, I also began my career as a coach for Exponent starting 2020. So my expertise mainly lies in the broad region of distributed systems, um, data pipelining, caching, model training, and deployment. And as a coaching role, I help my student with system designs, codings, resumes, behavior, interviews, etc. And I hold roughly 500 plus interviews slash mock interviews, and I have roughly 200 plus students. Okay. So this talk is designed to be interactive. So let's try to have some fun by looking at this two sum problem together. So this is a coding challenge, and the problem is given an array of integer numbers and integer target, return the indices of the two numbers such that they add up to the target. Right? So an example input is a simple array of 3, 2, 4, 3, and there is a single target, which is 6. Right? So can we type your answers in your in the meeting chat? Like what should be the return value in your opinion? And I'll wait for 20 seconds for that. Anyone? Just pick two numbers that add up to 6, right? All right. 0, 3, or 1, 2. 0, 3. All right, very good. So, the point I'm trying to make is sometimes we think we have done a good job, right? So providing a solution, a working solution to the interviewer, but somehow we get a rejection, right? So maybe the case here is the candidates think of, like I know what you want. Like I just pick any pair of indices, either in this case 1, 2, or 0, 3. So they add up to 6, right? 2 plus 4 equal to 6, and 3 plus 3 equal to 6, right? But maybe your interviewer, as some of the students already indicate there, they are actually seeking for a complete answer, right? So the right expectation here is to return both 0, 3 and 1, 2, right? So the takeaway here is always try to check in with your interviewer to see whether your understanding matches with theirs, right? Without a common understanding, like we are basically wasting our time implementing a wrong version of code. Okay, another case study here. So I have a student of mine who is not getting too many interviews opportunities, right? This is a section of their resume. So can we both take a quick look at this resume and maybe like provide a one comment or two in the chat box? Like, what do you see? There's something obviously wrong in this resume. What is it? I wait for 20 seconds for any potential thoughts. Yeah, not specific. No quantification. All right. Yeah. What kind of interventions? Yeah. Very good. I'm sorry. Yeah. So exactly. So I think like the major issue in this version of resume is there's no specific like highlights, no specific impact of uh, the work this particular student had done, right? So this is a much improved version, in my opinion. So first of all, like there are some technical terms, for example, Python, for example, MySQL, right? So those technical terms help your recruiter um, to identify all the necessary skill set that might make you a potential fit for the position, right? And also remember, most likely for big companies these days, your resume is not going to be delivered to a real person without a machine screening. So what I meant by that is there will be a machine doing a text parsing and also doing basically feed all the text in on your resume to a machine learning platform, which will spit out a matching score that determines whether your resume words to be reviewed by a human being or not, right? So those technology terms like help you to pass initial screening. So please be sure to include those technologies. Be sure to include the project names in your resume so you have a better chance to pass the initial screening. And also, importantly, quantification is also very important, right? So in the second bullet point of this improved resume, we see there is a 30% improvement in quality and 50% reduction in cost, right? Try to be as specific as possible and do not worry that your recruiter is not going to be able to understand your resume. Most of the recruiters are much more experienced, much more technical than we imagine. Okay. Right. So here is a quick overview for technical interview process for software engineers, starting with application online assessment, initial screening, technical phone screening, and on-site interviews, which might include coding interviews, object-oriented design interview, system design interview for those of you who are seeking for senior members of senior positions. But if you are just graduating from college, system design, this is out of the scope. And also a behavior interview is universal for everyone. So hopefully, after we go through the process, it will lead to an offer. So one common fear from my student is they think the academic project is shallow compared to industry project, and the quality is unknown, right? But my argument here is, although the academic project might only last for like 2 or 3 months, maybe it is a single individual project, or maybe it is a project from a team of classmates. The important message we would like to deliver here is we have some experience in designing, in implementing something relevant to an industry project. For example, in terms of like designing a chatbot, right? So what are the important steps? For example, we can say we curated a data set. We did some data processing, data pre-processing. We pre-trained the model and do some fine-tuning. We play with different hyperparameters to optimize the model response. And we can further say we implement a context management mechanism, right? So each of the items here might not be a huge task, right? It might be a week of task. But like the message we're trying to deliver to our interviewer is we have the knowledge, we have some project exposure to how to design a chatbot. So in the future, if given time, this candidate, it will be fairly easy for the company to train this particular candidate because they already have a similar background. Okay, so in general, what makes a good resume? Identify all the required skills, including both technical and soft skills. Demonstrate how your experience matches the job requirement. This means I would prefer not to use a universal resume for all the companies. At least for the companies I care about, I would like to fine tune my resume so that my resume, the experiences on my resume have a closer match to the job requirement, right? Use concrete examples, be technical when writing your resumes. List their own contribution and impact. For example, if it is a team project, right? And what is your role in a team? Are you a technical contributor, or you are more like a project manager, making sure everybody hit your target on time? So what is relevant to Exponent is Exponent have a lot tons of resources about like how to write a good resume. Right, so you can find regardless of you are pursuing a software engineering role or project management or data scientist or etc. Like you can find these resume workshops and courses on Exponent, and these courses are already made free of charge for Cornell students. Right. So speaking of technical interviews, so what are the questions involved here? So typically for software engineers, it usually starts with data structure and algorithms. System design is probably out of scope for all of you. Object-oriented designs for junior roles, this might be relevant for you. Low-level designs, example can be, how does a CPU scheduler work? Machine learning, if the role relates to machine learning, database and SQL, concurrency. For example, explain how to use logs and semaphores, behavior interviews. For data scientist interviews, algorithm and data structure with the focus on Python, product metrics, analytics, SQL will be much more important than software engineer. Machine learning, probability and statistics, behavior, and A/B test. For product management interviews, product sense, design, product strategy. For example, should Amazon enter the food delivery business, right? Technical communication, because you are going to interact with a lot of technical folks from different background. Execution, analytical thinking. For example, Facebook friends requests are down by 10%. What can we do here, right? Behavior, go-to-market strategy. For example, how would you launch a new product in a highly competitive market? Customer empathy, usage research. For example, what method do you use to understand a user's behavior? Cross-functional collaboration. Okay. So back to the coding question. A good coding question should reflect the capability to understand the problem, candidate basic coding skills, basic knowledge about algorithms and data structure, logical thinking process, and optimization skills, the capability to analyze corner cases and algorithm complexity. And when things go wrong, can the candidate debug the code? All right. So I use this figure as a method to explain how should we deliver a concept? How should we, for example, when we are trying to persuade our interviewer, we should use a specific algorithm. Like what kind of language should we deliver to an interviewer, right? So from the top to bottom, like the top are like a very high level concept when we describe our society, social groups, for example, families, right? That as we go down level by level, we enter more and more into the physics world, right? Um, from molecules to atoms to particles, right? But like think about like someone would argue, like isn't physical more like closer to the ground truth? Can physics describe everything? Physics can basically describe every phenomenon in this world, hopefully. But like, why shouldn't us use all the physical terminologies to describe everything? An example could be, can we use all the concepts in atoms, in particles, to describe an interview process? Think about it. It will be very, very hard to describe the interview process using only atoms and particles, right? So that's why, during communication, we would like to use a common pattern, a common abstraction layer to deliver our thought process. Now, here's a concrete example. Right. So, this is another coding challenge, which says, giving a string containing digits from 2 to 9 inclusive, return all the possible letter combination that the letter could represent. Return the net answer in any order, right? If we look at the telephone panel on the left-hand side, we see the digit of 2 maps to 3 characters starting ABC, and the digit of 3 maps to another 3 characters, D, E, and F, right? So if the input digit is 2 and 3, so we have 3 by 3 combinations. So therefore, the output start with A and D and end with C and F. Okay. Now, let's look at this potential solution. I'm not going to ask you to read every single detail of the code. This is too much, given the short period of time we had. But let's try to focus on the section I made it bold, right? We have a while loop. Inside while loop, we have a double nested for loop, right? So we are doing some operations on variable called new array, and there's another variable called array. We're doing some copy, and then eventually we return array, right? So when all of you walk through the code with me, can any of you identify the coding patterns here? I wait for 10 seconds for any potential answer. I bet you cannot. At least like I cannot, right? So what is this while loop? What is this double for loop? It is very complicated. Even if like the logic might be correct, meaning it might deliver the right result, but I had no idea like how to debug this, how to comprehend this, right? The same for you if you deliver such such version of the code, like an interview will have to ask you to explain the code. Chances are, something went wrong. You have to debug, right? And then we're going into a very messy path. Now, think about this improved version, right? So this has a function called backtrack. And inside the backtrack function, there's only one single for loop. Inside this one single for loop, there's some operation based on this variable called current, and then it called another function which happens to be the same name of the original function, right? So now, can anyone from the audience tell me what is this coding pattern? Are we familiar with this coding pattern? A function calls itself inside a function call. What is this? Recursion, exactly, right? So and in addition, this is a special type of recursion, and the function name kind of gives it away. It's called backtracking. It is fine, like if you are not familiar with backtracking or not familiar with recursion, but the point here is like if you use a well-known coding pattern, it makes a lot easier for your interviewer to understand you, and it makes you like it makes it less likely you write bugs and so that you have to debug, right? All right. So another common pitfall, right? Over optimize the solution. But like before we talk about that, let's say your interview asks you to implement an in-order binary tree traversal, right? So for the given tree on the left-hand side, um, what will in-order tree traversal print? Type your answer quickly. An in-order tree traversal start with the left tree, and then we visit the root of the tree before we go to the right side of the tree. All right. So due to time limit, I'm not going to wait further. So if we follow the left root right order, the printing should be 42513. Okay. So there are two typical solutions to implement in-order traversal. One is using a recursion, and another one is to use an iterative approach. Right? Both would yield O(n) of time complexity and O(n) of space complexity. But every once in a while, there is one smart student who says, "Hey Tom, I know we can optimize the space complexity to O of 1. Right? I know how to improve the space complexity." There is one technical techniques called Morris traversal. But do you know the Morris traversal requires us to modify the input tree structure, meaning the input, we have to mutate the input binary tree. But what if your interviewer's expectation is that input is immutable? Then we don't have to even to think about this optimization, right? So the takeaway here is like instead of like trying to over optimize the solution, checking with your interviewer, ask them, I have to optimizations to the extent that I feel comfortable. What do you think? What do you think about our current solution? Does that satisfy all the design constraint? If the answer is yes, then you don't have to spend time over optimizing the solution. Okay. Finally, this might be your lucky day, right? This is a problem you have solved before, right? Should I tell my interviewer, so that they can switch to a new problem to me, right? So my 2 cents is you don't have to tell your interviewer unless another interviewer from the same company has just asked you the same question, right? But the takeaway here is like usually, you don't really want to trust your memory because your interviewer can change the problem constraint, can change the corner cases, can change the format of the input and output of the problem. So it becomes a completely new problem. Even if you think this is a problem you have solved before, this might be a new problem to you. So my suggestion here is like you should always treat the problems as if this is the first time you encounter them. Okay. So in general, there are some additional coding interview tips, examples, right? So you would like to propose examples to eliminate any vagueness in understanding the problem. You would like to perform complex analysis, both in time and space, and use complex analysis to drive your optimization. You would like to maintain a healthy workflow, right? Some of my students, some of the candidates, they do they write some code and then think about some other approaches, think about optimizations. So they refactor their code or they completely discard their code, which is in my opinion an unhealthy workflow, right? A healthy workflow should start with a brainstorm session, right? So you discuss with your interviewer about your solution, your proposal, and once you two are have reached an agreement, you start implementation, right? And then after you implementation, if there's more time, you can think about further optimize your code. Right? Listen and be ready to take hints, right? Some of your interview question can be very difficult, right? So take the hints and answer your interviewer's questions. Assume your interview is always warm-hearted and helpful. They want you to be successful, right? So those hints will really help you. Keep calm. We have multiple rounds. Even if you blow up one of them, it's not the end of the day. It's not the end of the world. Ask for a different question in worst case, right? Interviewers have different personalities, right? So basically you cannot judge whether they like your solution or not based on their facial expression, right? So I'll quickly go over the system design framework because I don't think this is applicable for all of you guys at the moment, but it might be useful for you in 2 years or 3 years later, right? So I'll give you a case study to give you some sense of what a system design interview look like. The design problem can be design an application such as Instagram. We would like to satisfy the user's requests, such as user can upload images, user can follow other users, user can view a news feed from the accounts they are following. So a high-level design could be, like the user start with a mobile client. The request firstly go to a load balancer before it hits a read or write server. All the contents eventually go to a metadata DB, which records, for example, the timestamp, the title, the location of the photo, and the raw photo bytes goes to an object storage. And your interview will always be interested in how do we scale up the system? For example, how do we speed up the newsfeed generation? So there are several techniques we can throw in there. For example, we can deploy a caching layer. We can deploy a message queue. We can have a specific newsfeed generation service that connects the cache and the metadata DB. Okay, so I'm not going to spend tons of time in it, as like Exponent already have a wonderful system design interview courses, and this might become handy to you in the future. And I know this is a good course because I am one of the authors, and this is a real find on the market. So please take advantage of that when it is the time. So this is a case study for project management roles. The question is to help Facebook decide whether or not to add a feature to show videos that a user's friends like. Some proposals can be A/B test. For example, we can separate the group users into two, one with the feature enabled and another group of users with the feature disabled, and then compare the time spent on the platform. Or we can do some analytics. For example, we can calculate the percentage of user-like videos among all shared videos. Or we can do some surveys, gather quantitative data of whether user would find the feature useful or rather annoying. But should we discuss what is the product metric first, right? So at the end of the day, every single social media, they care about like increase the user engagement. But how do we define user engagement? We can define it by the time spent on the platform or the number of clicks, click-through rate, the interaction between friends, the user retention time, right? And then with these definition, we can start to think about whether the feature actually help increase the user engagement. Maybe the answer is yes, because users tend to spend more time when watching videos compared to text-based newsfeed, because the videos are more interesting, because the videos are more relevant. Or maybe the answer is no, right? Because the video might get repetitive, or the video are passive contents, right? So, user might only be interested in watching the video without like doing much user interaction with their friend. So in the long term, we might decrease the user retention time, right? So define the product metric and then think about both sides of the coin to debate whether this is a good feature to launch or not. Going back to Exponent, like resources, you can find tons of resources for data scientists, roles, and also product management roles as well. Okay. This is another case study. We'll go very quickly. This is a case study for object-oriented design. The question is, can you design an elevator system for a building using object-oriented design principles? Okay. So this is a very common popular topic, but like the point I'm trying to make here is to how we can ask, what kind of clarification questions we can ask here. For example, right? So is the elevator mainly designed for passengers or it is for good transportation? Do we have multiple elevators in one story, or there's only one elevator in the system, right? So we can ask a lot of clarification questions before we start designing. We start a real design. So those clarification questions can help us to narrow down the scope of the question, and then can try to save us a lot of time. Lastly, the last case study here is a case study for behavior interview. So the question is, tell me about the time you disagree with the team, right? So in an academic setting, the team can be your professor, or your teammate, your classmates who are doing the same project with you, right? So actually, what are the interviewer looking for in this case? For example, they are looking for whether you have the backbone, integrity, right? Are you thinking for the best interest for the team? Whether you have analytical thinking capabilities, right? Whether you can give constructive feedback, right? If there's any conflict, how did you resolve the conflict, right? If anything went wrong, like do you simply blame others, or do you give constructive feedback so that like the same bad thing wouldn't happen again, right? Can you do self-reflection, right? So if this is a process, if this is a process you optimize, like what can you do differently to further optimize the process, right? If you ever encountered an outage, what can you do differently to prevent those outages from happening again? So when you are trying to answer these behavior interview questions, try to use a STAR model, which stands for situation, task, action, and result. Describe the situation, describe your task, describe the action you have taken in face of these situation and tasks, and describe the impact and result. You bring it to the project, you bring it to the team. Okay. So interview is a two-way street. So what your interviewer is looking for is they are looking for signals to judge, can you get the job done? Are you going to crash everything on your first day of the job? right? If you write a lot of bugs, maybe the answer is yes, right? Can you cover a sufficient number of corner cases? Is your testing methodology robust enough? How much effort do they have to spend reviewing your code? If you have a really good coding style, if your code comes with comments, their effort in reviewing your code will be minimal. Are you a person that is easy to work with, right? Are you willing to take hints? Can you explain things well? And as a candidate, what can we do? What should we think about? I think we should consider, does the interview, first of all, does my interviewer know the problem at all? Or they just sort of randomly pick a problem from the question bank? When things go wrong, do I have enough support? This reflects whether the company's culture is more biased towards independence or it appreciates more of a collaboration culture. How strict are the coding review process? If the coding review process is strict, if they provide a lot of comments, feedbacks, maybe they care a lot about the robustness of the code. Otherwise, they might care a lot about the time to market. Do they appreciate my code? Is the position a good fit for me? How much bargaining do I have when I negotiate my offer, right? If I have done a really good job in delivering my code, I have a higher bargain. I can use it to ask for a better package, right? So some additional practice tips, be mindful about the time. Usually your interview only lasts for 45 minutes. For coding questions, focus on medium level common problems. For hard problems, practicing taking hints. Do a sufficient mock interviews before you go to a real one, right? So every single one of us will definitely going to blow up our first interview. So make sure we only blow up the mock interview, not the real ones. Break interview into multiple days if it's possible, right? So lastly, I'm going to repeat some of the contents you already watched in video, but I thought the sound is not so great, so I'll go through it here. So Exponent offers tons of courses for different roles and for different coding languages. So you can basically browse these courses and then find one that suits that fits you. For example, we have machine learning engineer interviews, we have security engineering and cybersecurity interviews, and so on and so forth. And practice problems, like Exponent also have this online coding platform where you can practice Python, JavaScript, C++, SQL, and more, right? So it has expert video solutions and mock interviews. It has, over the years, we have a large community. So the community refreshes the question bank and provide answers and discussions for these questions. So we have over 2,000 real interview questions and answers in the database. You can basically sort by search and browse by roles, companies, and categories. And you can also sort it by trending, newest, or most common problems. And this is, in my own opinion, one of the most powerful features offered on Exponent. So we have a mock interview platform, and it is free of charge. So basically, how it works is it matches you with another candidate that might be all over the world who shared the same experience, who shared the same career goal with you. So both of you can practice mock interview together. At one time, you are going to be the interviewer. At that time, you can be the candidate, right? So you both will receive standardized feedback form from each other, and so that you can improve. So, here's the way you can create a free account. You can visit exponent.com/login and log in with your university, or simply you can try exponent.com/Cornell to begin your access and start your interview practice journey with Exponent.